After an injury-riddled season last year, and despite still dealing with some of the worst injury luck in the entire league this year, the Grizzlies have made it clear that they're one of the best teams in a ridiculously competitive Western Conference. They currently sit at second in the West, and they're one of only 5 teams in the NBA that ranks top 10 in both offensive and defensive rating. Ja Morant is back to setting the table for their offense. Their young guys and role players are providing valuable contributions to mitigate the impact of all their injuries, but probably the biggest key to their success has been Jaren Jackson Jr. playing at a level that we've never seen him play before. Now, you might look at his box score from last season and see that he's averaging roughly the same number of points per game this year, but that doesn't tell the whole story. Jaren Jackson Jr. has undergone a major metamorphosis since coming into the NBA, adding a ton of different elements to his game over the years, culminating into a monstrous two-way force that's a perfect complement to Ja Morant. But what's caused him to take this next step as an offensive weapon, turning an already devastating defensive presence into one of the best two-way players in the entire league, and how does this take the Memphis Grizzlies to the next level? That's what I'm going to be breaking down in this video. If you enjoy it or find it informative, be sure to leave a like and subscribe. Let's get into it. Last year, on paper, was far from Jaren Jackson Jr.'s best season. A quick glance at his per game stats, and sure, he averaged a career high in points per game, but on the flip side, his efficiency was close to the lowest of his career. A major part of this is due to the fact that his usage rate was the highest of his career. This makes sense considering the Grizzlies were navigating the absence of Ja Morant, Desmond Bane, and Marcus Smart for the majority of the season, so he had to shoulder a much larger offensive burden. But it wasn't just the highest usage rate of his career, it was the 13th highest usage rate in the entire league. Now, why is this important? Well, it's important because he had to go from playing more of a complementary role next to Ja Morant and Desmond Bane to now being the #1 option for extended stretches of the season. And even though his efficiency wasn't the best, the benefit was that he got to explore the full range of what he could potentially be capable of as an offensive engine. And now we're seeing the benefits of that development. For example, he's looking more comfortable with the ball in his hands than ever before, and he's generating offense for the Grizzlies in all sorts of ways, but especially as a driver. He's making a compelling case to be one of the best ball handling centers in the entire league. Depending on what source you're looking at, he's listed as anywhere from 6'10" to 7 feet tall, and when you pair that with his 7'4" wingspan and 250-pound frame, you end up with a downhill force that's incredibly difficult to stay in front of, even for some of the best defenders in the league. When I was watching film for this video, it was insane to me how often he'd get a matchup against guys like Anthony Davis, Draymond Green, Kristaps Porzingis, guys who are elite defensive anchors, and they'd have no chance slowing him down, disrupting his drives, or stopping him from finishing at the rim against them. He's got no shortage of counters, being able to go from trying to break his man down off the dribble to backing him down and then flowing into his bag of post moves, all in the same possession. That's what, to me, is one of the most dangerous parts of Jaren Jackson Jr.'s game. The fact that he's not only capable of scoring like a big, but the fact that he can also operate on the wing, handling the ball at a high level to dribble the ball through traffic, able to split multiple defenders, and then once he gets within 5 to 10 feet of the rim, he's got all that traditional big man talent at his disposal that he can go to get a good look. He's pretty much unstoppable once he gets anywhere close to the basket. He's hitting 71% of his shots at the rim, which is the highest rate of his career, and he's hitting his short mid-range shots, which are anywhere within 14 feet of the basket and outside of 5 feet, at a 54% clip. He's shooting 59% on all of his shots within 14 feet of the basket. And to give you some perspective, that's 1.19 points per shot. That's roughly the equivalent of shooting 40% from 3. And speaking of three-point shooting, that's something that Jaren Jackson Jr. has been known for throughout his career so far. It's also generally been one of the less consistent parts of his game. even though he has had multiple seasons where he's shot effectively from three. I've done an entire video on how important bigs are that not only can space the floor at a high level, what we know as stretch bigs, but also protect the rim at a high level. These players are extremely coveted, not only because of how important they are to team success in the modern NBA, but also because of just how few of them there actually are. As of last season, there were roughly only 8 players that really fit the criteria of what I've called the stretch and protect big. We know that Jaren Jackson Jr. is going to be one of the best rim protecting bigs in the NBA, but what's that three-point shooting looking like so far? His second year in the league, he was a nearly 40% perimeter shooter on high volume, and while his perimeter shooting this year isn't on that level, shooting 36.4% from three, that's still an effective rate, and I don't think the percentages tell the whole story. Arguably just as important as actually hitting the shots is whether or not defenses are treating you like you can hit those shots, and defenses definitely treat Jaren Jackson Jr. like a floor spacer. This is due in large part to the fact that he's attempting the 5th most threes per game by a center in the NBA, and when you're hitting them at a respectable clip like Jaren is, you're much more likely to get your defender to stay closer to you, which gives the rest of your team more spacing to work with. You can see a player like Ja Morant directly benefiting from the spacing that Jaren provides, with Jaren keeping Giannis away from the play so that Ja has an easier time creating for himself one-on-one without having to worry about that extra help. Oubre is pretty reluctant to show hardly at all off of Jaren in the corner, giving Ja the space that he needs to take on Lowry in the paint. Yeah, the percentages aren't as high as you'd want them to be, but the spacing he provides with his perimeter shooting is what really helps their offense operate effectively, and that efficiency is good enough to still have a positive impact when he gets the open look. But there's another important aspect to all of this. When his defenders are pulled out to the three-point line on him, but they get called ball watching, this is where you're going to see Jaren do a ton of damage on the offensive end. And this is because Jaren has fantastic feel as a cutter. When defenses have their center on him and that center decides to leave him to provide help, Jaren is great at making these backdoor cuts to the basket to give the ball handler an exit plan. I emphasize the importance of him making his defender feel uncomfortable helping, and while that's still true, even if they do help off of him, that's just half the battle. Not only do they have to be prepared to help wherever the ball is, but they also have to remain conscious of wherever Jaren is whenever he's cutting from the perimeter. And that's a really difficult task for any defender. All the things that make him such a dangerous driver are things that also make him such a dangerous cutter. It's really hard to stop a 250-pound giant barreling towards you, getting the ball in stride on his way to the rim. This variety of different offensive skill sets have culminated into Jaren Jackson Jr. becoming a premier offensive big. And honestly, it's a little bit unfair that he's as great of a defender as he is. He's among the best two-way players in the entire NBA this year. He's one of only 4 players in the NBA recording an offensive EPM and defensive EPM of 2 or higher. Of those 4 players, he's the only one recording a steal rate and a block rate of 2.5%. Now, Jaren Jackson Jr.'s block numbers are a lot lower than they've historically been, but let me explain. Jaren Jackson Jr. is playing much differently this season than he has in the past on the defensive end. Although he's split time between the power forward position and the center position throughout his career, he's spending 70% of all of his minutes at center this year. That is the highest rate of his entire career. His defensive impact is felt more now as an interior defensive anchor, to where instead of letting guys get by him so that he can chase them down and play make defensively, he's now able to deter them from even trying anything at the rim in the first place. And even when opposing teams are getting to the rim against him, he's still defending the rim effectively. With Jaren Jackson Jr. on the floor this season, opposing teams are shooting 61.2% at the rim, which is in the 83rd percentile defensively. He covers so much ground and can make himself occupy so much space that it doesn't matter where he is on the floor. At any given moment, he can fly out of nowhere and catch a ball handler by surprise and swat their shot at the rim. But what makes him so devastating is that he's operated in so many different roles on the defensive end over the years that he can still disrupt plays on the perimeter. He can provide timely digs when guys try to drive to the basket, and he can play in the passing lanes to nab steals. He's the only player in the league at the time of this recording nabbing at least 1.5 steals and 1.5 blocks per game this season, and he's second in the NBA in stocks. There are very few players in the NBA capable of contributing on both sides of the ball like Jaren Jackson Jr. While the years building around him, Ja Morant, and Desmond Bane have been marred by injuries, the developmental reps that Jaren has gotten have allowed him to develop into such a well-rounded player. Really hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, as always, please consider leaving a like and subscribing. It helps support the channel and allows me to continue making videos like this. Regardless, thank you guys so much for watching. I'll see you in the next one.